Good morning. This is my 2019 CB650R, and the issue that I have with it ever since I've owned it is that it has a slight oil leak from the water pump. So today, to rectify that, I will be draining down the coolant, replacing the O-ring on the water pump, and refilling with coolant, bleeding the system. I've watched some videos and everyone I've seen so far has done it wrong. It's not the same as the CB650F. It is a different procedure, which is where a lot of people are making a mistake. So today I will talk you through that and we'll see if we can get it fixed. So this is what I have ready before I start. I've got 3 litres of coolant. This is what is recommended by my local Honda dealer. In the US, I think you have HP Cool. This item is a new washer for the drain plug on the water pump. This is the new O-ring for the water pump, which must be letting the oil through on the pump at the moment. I've got an oil catcher to catch the coolant because it can get messy, and last but not least, something to put it into. You don't want to drain it all into there and then realise you've got nothing to put it into, and that is sitting around in the garage for 2 weeks until you tread in it or kick it over. So make sure you've got something to pour it into, and please dispose of it responsibly. This isn't something you can pour around the back of your house. This needs to go to your local refuse centre and be disposed of properly. So as you can see there, I've taken off the air intakes from both sides. You definitely need to take the right hand side one off. The left hand side one probably not, but I've taken it off just because it gives me a bit better access and I can see what I'm doing a little bit better. I'm not going to go through everything because if you're tackling this job you must be moderately proficient. So you're not going to have to watch me undo every nut and bolt and explain how to do it. The next thing to come off is the sprocket cover. I've got to take this cover off and then take the front sprocket off to gain access to the water pump. This will look different on yours maybe because this is an aftermarket part. First of all, I need to take this off. You can see where it fits, look, because if you look on that shaft, if I can get it in focus, there you go, there's a little dot on the left hand side which lines up, look, with the line of the arm, so you can get it back on into the right place. So I'll be removing that now. Okay, so there is your water pump there. Now this bottom plug, this bottom bolt here is your drain plug, and then you've got 2 fixings, one just there, one on the other side. Now the first thing you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take these pipes off and drain the coolant out of these pipes, and then undo this drain bolt and drain the last little bit out of the pump. Now the reason that you do that is if you've got any floaters or crud around the system, if you just undo this bolt you're going to have to drain all the crud through the water pump, so there's a chance of infecting it with stuff that doesn't want to really be going through it and left in there. But as it's quite a new bike and there's likely not a lot in there, not a lot of bits in there, I'm just going to undo this drain bolt and drain the whole lot out through there, because first of all it makes a lot less mess, and I'm not in any particular rush, so I don't mind waiting for a few minutes for it to drain out. So the first thing to do is to loosen your radiator cap, because you'll have an airlock and you won't be able to drain it down. So you need to undo that cap so that the air can go in that end and the liquid can come out the other end. Okay, so you can see that draining out through the drain plug. Minimum mess. Okay, so I've removed those hoses. They are wedged up there. I've removed the sensor wire out of the way, tucked it in behind the chain. So now you can see the 3 mounting bolts. You've got that one there, that one there, that one there. Undo those 3 and then you'll be able to slide the water pump out. You might have to lever it around a bit, wiggle it about because you've got that O-ring sealer in there. Okay, so there's the water pump out. That came out very easily, didn't need to lever it out, it basically just fell out. So this is the shaft that goes into the engine, which has got oil on it, which is sealed by this O-ring here, and this is obviously what's been leaking. So I'm going to try and clean this all up a little bit and take that O-ring off and inspect it and see if I can see any damage to that O-ring, so I can find out why it was leaking. Clean it off carefully, try not to contaminate inside these pipes and this shaft end, obviously with any bits, because that's going to be going back into the engine and that's going to be going around your coolant system. So I've cleaned up the pump, and I've inspected this O-ring, which doesn't seem to have any damage. The shaft doesn't seem to have any damage, so there's nothing to explain why it was leaking, other than the fact it's quite a loose fit. It's really not very tight on there, and also it's not very tight even when it's fitted into the housing, because it just slotted straight out. There wasn't any leverage or any pulling, it just slid out. So I'm not surprised that oil is making its way past this O-ring, and it's just as likely to be getting past the ring on the inside of the ring as it is on the outside of the ring. So I've got my new O-ring here, which really doesn't seem to fit any tighter. I'm not convinced that just fitting a new O-ring is going to solve the problem. And I've also read about quite a few people that have changed the O-ring and refitted it, and they've still had the same leaks. Same things just happened. So I am tempted to use a bit of sealant on this surface and then put the ring on top. Now that isn't good practice. You shouldn't be sealing in rubber O-rings. But in this case, I may do it. Need to be careful, because obviously any contamination that you get on there that can break away is going to be floating around your engine. So you need to be really careful if you do anything like that, to make sure that it really is a minimal amount. And I may use this stuff. This is 3-bond 1207B. This is what you use for fitting the casings together. This is a gasket sealer, or a gasket, liquid gasket. This is the same stuff that Honda used to fit the engine together. It's really good stuff, but you need to be careful that you obviously put a very small bead between mating surfaces when you're putting crankcases on and things like that, because everything that squeezes on the outside that you can see is also squeezing on the inside. So if you get a drip or something like that inside the engine, that's going to pump around the engine and you're going to have problems. So yeah, I think I'm going to smear a very, very fine bit around there, seal this O-ring on, it'll hold it in place. It'll stop any oil being able to then penetrate underneath the O-ring. Not particularly happy about doing it, but the last thing I want to do is fit this new O-ring on, put it all back together, and find out that I've still got the same problem. Excuse me sniffing, I've got a bit of man flu. So yeah, I'm going to try that, and we'll see how we go from there. So this is the housing of the water pump. Machine face looks all good. I've cleaned it up. Doesn't seem to be any manufacturing issues there. When you put your water pump back in, see the slotted piece in there. Make sure that that lines up with your water pump and that slots back in correctly. Now what you're supposed to do here is you're supposed to smear a bit of engine oil around the inside of that housing for sliding in the water pump, but I'm actually going to use a bit of red rubber grease. Red rubber grease is what you use on O-rings. It's used a lot on brake piston seals because it's vegetable oil based and doesn't degrade the rubber. Now what you don't want to do is smear a load of that around here, because it'll be, if it gets pushed into the engine, you'll have big blobs of grease blocking oil ways. So I'm going to put a very, very almost invisible film of red grease around there, because if there is any oil coming through, that might help to make a bit more of a seal. I think it's going to be more effective than smearing a bit of engine oil around there. So that's the water pump back in, the 3 bolts in, and the drain plug with the new washer fitted. That's tightened to 13 Newton meters. The mounting bolts are tightened to 12 Newton meters. So when you're draining down your coolant, the correct way to drain it down is to take the exhaust off and drain the tank out, take that tank out, drain it down. That's a long way around doing it. I don't care whether every tiny bit of coolant is out. It's only been in there a couple of years. So what I use is a piece of tubing with a syringe on the end to start the fluid from siphoning off out of there and into the catch pan. I see people sucking on tube to siphon it into the catch pan. Don't do that with coolant, that is deadly. It's all too easy to end up with it in your mouth and swallowing it. Nasty gear. So put the tube into the end of there, make sure it's in, suck on the siphon, pull some out through the syringe, and then you should be able to drop the lower end into the pan, take the syringe off, and it should drain out by itself. I've reattached the hoses. I've used some new black hose clips because the original ones were getting a bit rusty and corroded. Just looks a bit tidier. So refilling the coolant and bleeding the system. This is the correct way to do it. First of all, refill into the reservoir to the upper limit. I had bought a proper funnel to do that with, but obviously it hasn't arrived. So you can make one with some foil. You can't use normal funnels because you can't get the angle, but you can make something like this that will work. The next thing is to undo that bleed plug, which is on the right side just under the tank. Now this is where we differ from the F model, because the F doesn't have this. You have to bleed it through the filler cap, but we don't need to do that. We've got a special pipe with a plug on the end. So take that off, take that plug off. And also the difference between the R and the F is that you'll notice that drain cap on the radiator, we haven't had to touch that at all. That's not needed to be used. Okay, so there's the cap out. That just pulls out. It's not a twist. It's just pulls out. You need to loosen off that hose clip, and then we continue to fill the system through the radiator cap up to the top, up to the filler neck. So once you've got the coolant filled up to the top of the filler neck, put the bike on the side stand, which will lean it over that way, and the air will bubble up. You'll see the air bubbles bubbling out of that filler cap. And then what you need to do is you need to start the bike up, let it idle for 2 or 3 minutes. That will put the coolant around the system, and the bubbles will be, you'll hear it bubbling in the filler cap. And also it'll be the air will be escaping out of the bleed pipe. I've put the cap back on now, but your cap will be off. Air will be coming out of this bleed pipe. It will be burping a little bit, so you'll need to have a bit of tissue or something under there to catch bits of fluid that spit out as it's burping itself. Leave that running for 2 or 3 minutes, and then you need to give a few revs on the throttle just to force the coolant around the system. Again, while you're doing that, have a tissue underneath the bleed pipe, because there'll be a bit of fluid spitting out of there. When you've done that and you think that you've eradicated any air that is coming out, you can refill the neck up to the top, but do that with the bike upright, don't do that with the bike on the stand. Put your cap on, put your plug back in, you should be good to go. Check the level of your reservoir, that it's still in the right place, and it should be job done. Obviously you need to refit the front sprocket and cover, etc. Fit your air intakes back on, but you should be have a bled system then that's good to go. So once you've got your bike back together, run it up to temperature. It should stabilise at the normal temperature. If it gets into the red and you start getting a warning, obviously there's still air in the system and it's not pumping around correctly, in which case you'll need to drain it down and try again. But hopefully you should be alright if you've done it the correct way. Check your reservoir, make sure that your level in your reservoir is stabilised, and you should be good to go. I hope this video has been helpful to you. Ride safe, take care.